This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Weather My Trains. Hey, are you like me and the thought of doing a DIY weathering job on an expensive engine leaves you in fear? It's time to call in Rob Arsenault at Weather My Trains. Do what thousands of satisfied customers have done and let Rob help you notch up the realism on your layout with beautifully detailed weathering on your locomotives and rolling stock. To see what Rob can do for you, check out his website at weathermytrains.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. On today's episode, we're talking to the Nutmeg Division of the NMRA, and representing them, we have the Superintendent, Art Dutra. Art, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ray. Nice to talk to you.
Great talking to you. And we've also brought along the social media lead, Mike Wheeler. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ray. Thanks for having us.
Great to have you both here. It's a pleasure to talk to you guys. So we've got 3 Nutmeg Division members in the room here, myself included. So looking forward to talking to you guys about the division and a little bit of the history and what you guys are up to and what you have planned for the division that covers most of Connecticut and a little bit of Massachusetts. Do I have that right?
That is correct. All of Connecticut except for Fairfield County and Hampton and Hampshire counties in Massachusetts.
Excellent. First, Mike is joining us. I just saw Mike yesterday as we're recording this. Is the day after the Vernon Train Show up in Vernon. Well, I guess they called it the Model Train Show up in Vernon, Connecticut. And that was put on by the Amherst Railway Society. And they did a phenomenal job for a first-time railroad show. What do you think, Mike?
I think they put together a very solid, small show. Having been around and traveled to some of these shows in New England, you get some of these small ones that feel small. And this one certainly didn't. I think the management in charge of it certainly has a lot to do with it. And they've got a lot of experience from a number of shows. And you had Dave Owens on talking about the lack of shows in Connecticut. I don't think we have that problem going forward.
No, not especially with this one in place. And again, we had the right people doing it between, Dave Owens and John Sacerdotti's involvement with the show. It definitely had the right people at the controls. And I think they're going to hand off, maybe in the next year or two, maybe to, the organization they were supporting, which was the Rockville High School music department. But they're going to hand them off a great show, and it's off to a great start.
And there were a lot of the younger members of the Vernon School District there. So a lot of students and several faculty there. So they were up front and center the whole time.
Yeah, a lot of great things working for them. Obviously having that support and having a group that's interested in doing a train show. And then location, right off of I-84 in Vernon. It was a good place to be, somewhere, right between Hartford, and it's not in the middle point between Hartford and Boston, but certainly anybody that was in central or western Mass could definitely get to the show relatively easy. So it definitely can draw a good crowd. I
think right in the middle of that tri-state area too, between western Rhode Island, eastern Connecticut, which doesn't get a whole lot of pull for a lot of these events. This is a great spot for a train show, like you said. And
not too far of a travel for you either. You were right down the road from it.
No, if we have all these train shows 15 minutes from my house, that'd be great.
It might be a little trouble with your wallet, but I know you weren't there just to see the train show. You had a purpose there. You were representing the Nutmeg Division at the show. Tell us a little bit about what your purpose was at the show.
So one of the things that we, in traveling around, I certainly go to train shows on my own, and you go up north, you find the Hub Division at virtually every show in Massachusetts and a few outside of there. And we have a number of small shows here in Connecticut, and this is our region. Why are we not presenting there? And I brought this up to our board last year, and it was a full support there of let's get the required tools in terms of banners and such, and let's go have a presence, because the worst that can happen is we get the name Nutmeg Division out in front of people, and maybe we'll grab a new member or two, or even a lapsed member. And I've done 2 shows here, the TCA show in Manchester and the Vernon Model Train Show. And I've had a number of lapsed members or new members come up and say, how's it been? What's the division like these days? We've gotten some new emails. We've gotten a lot of interest. It's an exciting time. And I think we're just starting to hit on how can we better present to these people.
And this seems like kind of a theme that we'll be getting into here, Art, with changes going within not only just the national, but even down to the Nutmeg Division level. But I want to get started with asking you first, how did you get involved in the Nutmeg Division?
I joined because I really believed in the mission of the NMRA back probably in the early 90s. I was basically lone wolf modeling. I saw the value in meeting with other people, learning from them. We know the industry's been changing. The local hobby shops are a very rare item nowadays. And that was the place where you went to talk to people and learn techniques and stuff, because people would sit around and gladly tell you how they did something on a model.
Right.
And it was a great resource. And that's pretty much gone now with the internet. So we really need to get back together as a group of like-minded hobbyists.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you joined in, you said the mid 90s,
Yes.
and became part of the Nutmeg Division. How did your role develop? I mean, you go from joining in the mid 90s to superintendent now. How does that progress to get to that? Is it your arm finds a way to fly in the air and you raise your hand? Is that how you become superintendent? But I'm sure you've had some activity between then and now.
Yes, pretty much. It started slow. Obviously, I still had my children at home back then, so that was taking up a lot of my time. But whenever I could make a meeting, I would get to a meeting, talk to people. I would always get calls every year from Ron Pelletier at my birthday wishing me a happy birthday. That was always appreciated, to get that feedback from the division. So they knew I was still out there and I was still active, and that was a good thing. As the kids started to move out now, I've got my time back and just redirecting myself. And with COVID, we all kind of did some self-assessments, and I said, what's value in my personal life? And I said, it's model railroading. It's been there since I was a kid, and I need to get back and make that the forefront again.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things you mentioned as earlier was that community, and you talk about calling you on your birthday. That's pretty nice to know that you're starting to build that kind of friendship and that camaraderie within the Nutmeg Division. How many members are in the Nutmeg Division right now?
I think we're at 150. We kind of waver around 150 to 170, depending on we pick some up, lose some.
That's still a pretty amazing number, 150, 170, somewhere in there. You said that's a really nice number to have. We certainly know there's a lot more than 150 or 170 model railroaders in Connecticut, but it certainly is a good cross-section of them.
And we have some very talented modelers as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, about the talent level of the membership and the things that they provide. Talk about some of the things you may have learned during your membership in the Nutmeg Division.
I really enjoyed talking to modelers when they would bring in their items to show off what they'd been working on. I got to see things firsthand. We're usually our own worst enemies. We're always critical of our own work. Right. And until you start looking at other people's work and having it side by side with your work, then you don't realize that you do have talent, and you can add to this community by sharing what you've learned over time too. So I think that was one of the key things, is that just that aspect of it. I know when I was a teenager, we used to have a local hobby shop here in Meriden, and the owner was a great guy. I would talk to him for hours on end. He was one of those guys that was taking diesel locomotives, and back in the days when you had to add all the individual parts to make an accurate model of a specific locomotive, and just learning from him and his techniques. And that was a great start.
Mike, how long have you been a member of the Nutmeg Division?
I joined in 2017, I believe February, but I've only been active since October of 2021.
So you joined but didn't become active. Tell us a little bit about that. What was the holdup of actually getting active in the Nutmeg Division?
I joined, and it's funny, I don't even recall what it was now. I had read about the magazine, and I joined pretty much solely for the magazine. And, which was, at the time, I was subscribed to all the big ones, Model Railroader, Railroad Model Craftsman, and there was this other resource out there. So I picked that one up. And as Art said, COVID happens and you reevaluate things. And I was living with my then fiance, now wife. And October 21 rolls around. It's the first in-person meeting of the Nutmeg Division. And I told her Friday night, hey, maybe I'll go to this, maybe I won't. And Saturday morning rolls around and she practically shoves me out of bed and says, go play with trains with other people now.
That's good.
And
that may be good. That may also indicate some other issues that may be going on, but at least, that's good that she's encouraging you. We'll take it that. We'll stay in the
I
positive.
have to say this before I go much further. I'm very happy to have a supportive wife who, there's a lot of people out there who tell you, repress your hobbies, repress your interests. My wife has been fully supportive.
That's outstanding.
It's a really cool hobby for her. We've actually done a few layout tours with her, and she's been just as impressed.
Awesome.
She's taken some ideas, which that's been fun. So, but then I go to that first meeting, and it's just so cool to be involved in a personal level. And I think one of the things that I've taken away is, we talk about the skills, we talk about the models, and that's all cool. But there's something to sharing the hobby with other people when you're excited about it and they're excited about it.
Absolutely. I say it multiple times on the podcast. The hobby is so much better shared. I mean, listen, I can appreciate the lone wolf, and I understand, but I will also say to them, just give it a try, because it's just amazing the stuff that you learn, the people that you meet, and the stories you hear. Hence the reason for the podcast, hence the reason for joining groups like the Nutmeg Division and getting that connection with people. You have this long gap, you finally get involved, and kind of a rapid succession for you to, your activity seems to ramp up pretty quickly here within the Nutmeg Division to your role of the social media lead. Tell us a little bit about that.
I guess there's two parts to that. Number one, again, very supportive wife who has been, all in on, I found something I'm really into. And she's like, if you're going to do this, you got to do it the right way. And the second part is, and this is, maybe leads into something else, noticing very quickly that I don't want to say by far, but I'm noticeably the youngest person in the room. And at the time, our superintendent, Jeff Hankey, would every time during the division business present the list of officers and the open slots. And I'm looking at that social media lead open going, I'm really a good fit for that, even though I'm not a social media person. So I reached out to Ron Pelletier, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and it seems like, obviously we know, and be very careful with how much younger you are than the rest of the group, because I don't think you're that far from some of us, but that whole social media thing is certainly a hot topic. And we know it's a hot topic and something that's being addressed right now at the national level of the NMRA. We had Lucy Dorma on the show, and we talked to her on a national level, really trying to use social media to attract younger members and then engage with those that are already on social media. And she's expanded the platforms that the NMRA is on and trying different approaches and different tactics to try to get more engagement. How is that really affecting that national level, kind of cascading down to the division? Have you really seen that start to have an effect on your role as the social media lead at the Nutmeg Division?
Absolutely. I think one of the big things when I started, number one, I don't want to say the divisions and regions had their Facebook pages and maybe an Instagram account, but they were, maybe not as frequent. If you follow any of the mainstream social media people, they're posting daily. They're posting multiple times a day. And you have our NMRA divisions and regions posting once a week, once a month. Maybe you get a meeting recap, maybe you don't. With Lucy, I've seen multiple daily posts. She's highlighting divisions, members, deals, the partnership program. To speak to, you're talking about getting in touch with the younger members. If anyone out there is a model railroad hobbyist subscriber, I highly recommend you look at, I think it's the last either October or September. And Joe Fugate has an excellent summary of getting to the younger populace. And he did a study on the subscribers, and his subscribers are just getting older. But going to the train shows, there's plenty of young kids. So he just asked them, what are you doing? They said, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram. That's where the NMRA has got to be in order to keep the momentum going. I think that's where Lucy's taking it. She's done a great job in the month or so that I've seen her. I know she's been very complimentary of me privately through a couple of the channels. And it's now the template is there. We have to share what our members are doing. We have to share the events. If you don't know what the events are, if you don't know what our members are doing, if you don't know the benefit of being around other members to learn from them, then we're not going to grow.
Art, I'm sure when you joined in the mid 90s and saw through then, and the internet was just kind of evolving and becoming a thing, and social media really wasn't a thing. It was kind of like that old sneaker net kind of thing of getting to the streets and hanging posters and everything else. I'm sure you went through that. And even now today, it's the same kind of thing. Like when you went into the local pizza shop and you hung a flyer up on the bulletin board, you still had to have something that stood out amongst everything else. And that's kind of where social media is too. It's really the same ideas and trying to attract and grab attention in a flood of other information and things that happen on social media. What are you finding, Mike, that's starting to work on that aspect of drawing attention to the Nutmeg Division?
I think the top quality modeling. We talked about, Art mentioned we have a number of top quality modelers here, and there's still an interest in high quality detailing, high quality work. There's still an interest in shared. I think one of the things I see a lot is the younger generation is very much interested in operations and rail fanning. So I tend to do a lot of those myself. Those are things you can do very easily with a smartphone. It's just a way that everybody seems to be able to connect. And then the other thing too is I'm always on the lookout for what other divisions, what other regions are posting, what's hot for them, what's not,
Yeah, for sure. Art, why don't you talk us through like a regular membership meeting at the Nutmeg Division, how often they happen, and then what one could expect when they show up for a division meeting?
Sure, absolutely. We do bi-monthly meetings, so we'll have 6 a year. The meetings, when I first started with the division, were pretty much the same. We would go through, we'd have a social hour, while everybody was getting set up. People would show off their models. We'd have time to talk to each other and see what was going on. We would go through the upcoming events, any business for the division, and then normally we would have anywhere from 1 to 3 clinics, and then we would try to get some layout tours in. We're trying to get a little more active in that respect now. We'll talk about a couple things in a while. But clearly, we needed to change the focus a little bit. I've been very involved with several organizations over time, and some of those organizations have refused to change with the times, and I've seen them pretty much wither on the vine because they're not bringing new people in. And as much as you try to help them change, they just didn't want to do it. I'm glad that the NMRA as an entire organization now has realized that they need to really kind of shake things up and change and move with the times. Like Mike said, I went rail fanning last year. The Valley Railroad was doing one of their double headers. So we went down to rail fan that. And I was just amazed by the fact that every stop that we went to, we would see a half dozen young men setting up cameras and filming, and they're just chattering back and forth. Hey, do you have a channel? And they'd be talking about where they've been, where they're taping. And most of these gentlemen had their mom or dad along to drive them because they weren't old enough to have a license yet.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going, any idea that the hobby's dying is just nonsense.
Yeah, let's put that to rest. Yeah.
It's just a fallacy,
Yeah.
and it happens everywhere. There's always the naysayers that say, "Oh, we're dying, we're withering." It doesn't matter what it is, what hobby or what event it is. It's always going on that way, and it's out there. We just need to go where those younger people are and show them that just because we've been around the block a few times, we still have the same interests. We all like the same thing. It's a good group, and it's a good way to socialize and be with other people that really like just the art and majesty of railroading in general.
I can say this, again, the argument or that terrible belief that the hobby is dying, and maybe if you're a somebody that was stuck in your ways and you don't want to see any bit of change for you, yeah, it probably is dying. But what I will tell you is it's not. It's evolving. The hobby is evolving. Technology is at the forefront of it. The things that are available now, the cottage industry that's available now. I mean, we saw vendors like we saw at this train show just yesterday, Mike, doing 3D printing and all the other technology stuff that's available. And the DCC is just evolving into Arduinos and all this other like higher technology stuff that the kids are really into. And now we just need to seem to make it relatable to them and find ways to evolve the division to include those types of things.
Yep, absolutely. 100%. And that's it. It started before me. As Mike had mentioned, the last superintendent, Jeff Henke, had really started to move in the right direction. One of the things, they had already put together a new website and was getting that up online. I went and checked today, and it's unfortunate that Google still has our old website popping up in the search engine ahead of our new website. So we've got to try to get people directed over to the correct website.
Well, making these changes in these projects are like big ship, small rudder, right? It takes a little bit of time to, evolve these things and build these accounts and build following. And Mike, you've touched upon that. What are some of the things that you're finding yourself that's seemingly attracting the younger crowd in those types of platforms? You mentioned YouTube being one of them.
I don't necessarily have the demographics in front of me. I think one of the things, is we're still kind of working with a historically, again, not to be detrimental or anything, just a historically older crowd. Again, operations are a big thing. It's so I know you and I go to Mark Herrick's quite often. I'm always taking videos of operations and interesting things. We talk about the older days where, I grew up in the late 90s or in the early 90s, where the whole of model railroader was dedicated to what you could do with an Athearn blue boxcar. And now we're to the point where you're soldering your own resistors and doing all these electronics at a far more in-depth level.
Right.
The more in-depth we can show, the better. The more in-depth I think about, one of the things we can talk about this to a further extent. I draw a lot from my own content to try and fill our pages. But the more I try to do, I've got to do it deep. It's not enough to do a simple job anymore. It's got to be a deep, well thought out project.
Yeah, and I think that's also relatable to them. The YouTube generation that goes to that, graduates from YouTube University and looks up things and, and connects. And when they can connect a division and then know that they could also go to a meeting and get that information. And one of those things that you mentioned doing that is the clinics that are offered. Why don't you talk a little bit about the clinics that are done at the meetings, Art?
Sure. Recently, or at least I've been trying to encourage a lot more hands-on types of clinics where we're actually demonstrating techniques and letting people try the techniques. I did one on taking styrene and just with paints and washes, making it look like weathered wood. So if you've got a fleet of flat cars on your railroad, I had a technique that you can pretty much knock them out. Half hour, you're doing a car a half hour, and it looks really good. I'm back in the steam era, so I've got wooden roof walks to deal with too. So all of that gets the same treatment. And it's just a quick and easy way. So I did that. We just did a clinic on soldering techniques. We were running short on time for that one. So that's going to be a repeat at our next meeting. And we'll go into more depth on that subject. And again, we're trying to get back to actually working on things. It's great when we get historical clinics and people are doing, the history of a specific railroad, or we just had a clinic on using railroad paperwork to track freight movements, which was really fascinating. That was a great clinic, and that really dovetails into the whole operations aspect. I think hands-on will also help bring those younger people in, because they're the ones that are going to be looking for the techniques that we've learned over time.
Absolutely. And, as much as we talked about the YouTube University I just mentioned, and I'm a tangible guy. I like to touch, feel, and see, that's how I learn things, and definitely a value when you're able to go, especially things like soldering, to be able to have somebody kind of with you or next to you or kind of do some, nope, try this or try that. YouTube still hasn't figured out how to do that, the interactivity. So it really is great to get to a meeting like that and be able to interact with folks, whether it's a talent you can share or a talent you can pick up.
Yes, absolutely. And, I've been thinking about it. The National does have money for local divisions for, member recruiting and retainment. And, I think that would be a good use of that small amount of money that you can get annually, is just buy supplies so that you can do hands-on clinics at these meetings. People can come in and they don't necessarily have to bring a lot of tools or supplies with them. We could have some within the division that are right there, and people can go to work and do things.
Absolutely. So learning techniques and getting to meet people. And then the third aspect of your division meetings is one I enjoy because we talk about it on the show, which is if you're looking to build a model railroad, one of the more important steps I believe you can do is go see layouts. and see as many as you possibly can. And that's one thing that you guys have worked into those meetings. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Mike?
Sure. One of the things and again, we have really top quality modelers here in the Nutmeg Division. And, we're very generous that we have a lot of very generous layout hosts who will open their basement or their garage or their attic to us. And it's really interesting to see the total composition of work. I think, when you talk about clinics, it's one thing for, maybe I can show you how I build cabooses or something like that. But it's another thing to see the finished unit. To go into someone's basement where they've spent a tremendous amount of time lighting each building so that they can run the whole layout and during daytime conditions or nighttime conditions is incredible. And you see the one thing I've told everybody this, I continue to be amazed by the way people can fold so much railroad into their basement, because you start track planning and you start drawing around the walls and you go, I'm out of space. But somehow people manage to fold a lot more.
Right.
It's the composition of scene. It's the way, the construction methods. And it's interesting. When we had our October meeting, our webmaster, Charles Gray, and I were at a gentleman's house. He lit all his buildings, and we're downstairs with him, and there's probably 6 or 7 of us and him. And he's literally bouncing around the room to each of us, pointing out all these things, and he's so excited. And there's not many other places you capture that excitement in the hobby. His excitement over the stuff he's built, how excited he is it's gone together well, how excited he is to show us, and how excited we are to see it to come together, and then we validate it. And I forget exactly how Mark phrased it when you guys came back from National, but it's you come home with it re-energized and you want to come home and build stuff. And that keeps that cycle going.
Yeah, it's contagious, when you start to go see layouts and you see them and even in various states. And I like to always make that point too, that when I've been on the Nutmeg layout tours, I went on the national layout tours, I've been on other layout tours as well. And you learn just as much, or maybe even sometimes more, from a layout that's half completed versus a full complete, because it's like an autopsy in front of you. Mm-hmm. You get to see the guts, you get to see, how it was done or how it's being done. So there's just so much to learn and so much passion that you can pick up. And there's always a takeaway from a layout visit. And it could be positive, and then sometimes it's things that you say, I probably wouldn't do it that way, or I don't like this part of it. And that's okay. I'm be careful telling everybody that, but there's a great amount of takeaways to visits of layouts. And it's certainly an important part of those meetings as far as sharing and getting everybody involved and being able to, you can't pick the layout and take it to the meeting. So when you can get people to come to your house and get to enjoy it with you, there's definitely a lot of inspiration in both directions on that.
I think, you talk about learning more from, I don't want to say incomplete, but layouts that are in progress. And it's interesting because, you never really look at the wiring, or you never look at the bench work. And I forget, there was a layout, my first meeting, and we're downstairs looking at the way the guy built the helix. Yeah. There's all sorts of the little things that you don't even really think about when you're building a layout, but to stand there and look at somebody when they're in progress, you realize just how much goes into it. I have my little switching layout in the next room, and that's months and months of work, and it's not tangible as months and months of work. And to look at some of these basement empires, which are literally decades in the making, is incredibly motivating. It's incredibly powerful. And there's just so much energy and joy in it.
There's also an element to it at times where you go to a completed layout. I'll mention one that, I certainly have a love for, which is Tony Donatelli's Western Maryland Tigard Valley Division. And when I would go to Tony's and you'd look at all the work he's done, it's sometimes overwhelming, but then you'd see a portion that he hasn't quite completed yet or whatnot. And then you start getting the clues, right? Like, this is doable. I see how he did it now. Or he'll take out the pictures and he'll share it with you and you go, I can do this. This looks like it's completely overwhelming to walk into, but as you start to break it down, you start to get the idea. Okay, I can do this step by step. I see I see the progress, and that's all about sharing. And that's so important again for the division. When you get to share that with members, they feel inspired that yes, I can do this, and I've got the people and I got the knowledge base from the division that I can tap into to learn how to do this.
I know. I mean, another one of our flagships is Chris Adams and his Valley line, and we all struggle with the modeler's block. You come home and you don't want to do anything. And you got 5 minutes at the end of the day, and you got Chris going. No, I did the same thing here. I glued a couple of stanchions on a locomotive, or I glued a lantern on, and here's a guy with what looks to be this fantastic layout having the same problems we are. Yeah. And it's really cool. It's really cool to have the motivation to see such great work. I think the other thing too about it is the thing that I've always taken away from it is everybody's doing good work. They're doing good work, maybe in their own way. Maybe they're doing something, maybe they're not doing something. Maybe nobody's doing. For example, I'm not a big fan of separate grabs because I got sausages for fingers, but I take very great care to paint things right. And you look at everybody's work. Jeff Hankey's been an inspiration of mine for a long time, long before I knew him, just because everything, the way he builds models is very practical, very cost effective, very simple, but it's very effective in your visual. And there's so many modelers in our local division and across the country, across the world, that are doing good work. And, just because they're not on the cover of Model Railroad or Railroad Model Craftsman doesn't mean you can't look to them for inspiration.
Absolutely. That's well said, Mike. There's always a takeaway from everybody too. There's always something you can learn from each person that you meet, and certainly being involved with the division is a great way to meet those folks. Art, we talked about your longevity in the division, and what have you seen since the point you've joined and now being superintendent? This evolvement. We talk about this on a big level. We've talked about the major changes the NMRA is making. We touched upon the social media stuff, but I know the national organization is trying to make some big evolve. They noticed that thing as well, the evolvement of the national division. How does that cascade down to the Nutmeg Division and changes that are coming from the national organization down to the division?
Well, I think it made the job easier for the local divisions. Is, as you said, it takes time to turn the ship, and national is the aircraft carrier. Divisions, we're a lot smaller than that. We should be more nimble, and we can be more nimble. And when you see, I don't know for how many years I would listen to the argument about why they couldn't produce a digital copy of the bulletin, the national magazine. And here Gordy comes on board, and that's the first thing he knocks down, and he does it in his first year, pretty much. And it puts it out there. If he can do that, then we're sitting here going, yeah, we've got the ability to make a lot of changes and draw in new people. And we just need to have a little bit of courage and go after it. Some things will work, some others won't, but you've got to try. You just can't stay stuck in your ways. So again, back on when we talked about the layouts, when Mike was talking about that, I was thinking about it as well. And there's some things that you can't even get out of the magazine. You have to talk to the layout owner in person, and the visits become very important for that. Things like how traffic patterns affect layout design. Unless you're really deep into layout design, you're going to miss that. But if you talk to somebody and say, oh, I had to rip this section out because X, Y, and Z problem, it was a bottleneck or whatever the case, you're learning stuff in those conversations. You saw what somebody else learned the hard way. Right. And it makes your job a little easier on your own layout. My layout's in the designing stages right now, and it is planned for operations. And, I'm trying to leverage all these people that have already gone down the road ahead of me so that hopefully it goes fairly smooth once I get started here very shortly.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. As you're planning a layout and you're having these conversations, I know I did it through a club and I met my mentor through a club, but it's really in that same mentality, whether it be a club or a division or that when you get in a group of people and then you start meeting other folks and you start learning through them, and they teach you their lessons and their mistakes, and you get to laugh at whoops, I shouldn't have done this or that, or the things that you think that your layout was going to be and what it turned out to be, kind of stuff, all facilitated through that, just the community that develops and the friendships that are built there. And I'm sure you've, over many years that you've been involved, Art, I'm sure you've made quite a few of those friendships.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm very fortunate, when I really started to get active in the Nutmeg Division. I'm a narrow gauge modeler, so we're usually few and far between. And to find 3 other very talented narrow gauge modelers within our division that all have layouts in various stages, that was just phenomenal. And we've become quite close. We'll do a lot of traveling to go see layouts or go to train shows or whatever, go rail fanning. And, it's a great group to have. And if you're planning to build a layout, I've learned already that all of my previous layouts have been small, like switching style layouts. But if I'm going to really do an operations-based layout, I'm going to need help.
Right.
You just can't physically do it in your lifetime. You're going to run out of time. So you need people that are going to be able to give you a hand to get that vision across the finish line.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, that's one thing I've learned. I've talked to, modelers that have built some really beautiful layouts here on the podcast, and finding out how they, that it was basically, it takes a village kind of thing when it came to their layouts. And for example, I'll give you Drew James, who's part of that central New York region, which is a great division that's going on. They've got a lot of great stuff out there. But he had a group of guys coming over, helping with the scenery, helping with bench work, helping with all the stuff, track laying, and that's how it can be accomplished as a team. And it really started around their division. They've got a super division out there in that Syracuse type area. I don't want to call it Finger Lakes region. I got yelled at for calling it Finger Lakes, so I know it's like Syracuse area, but just a great group of guys out there and doing the same thing. And that's a great point, Art, is meeting the people that are eventually going to become your operating crew, become your helpers, and there's some really great folks in that Nutmeg Division that are willing to jump up and help.
Absolutely. I've never met a member so far that has, refused to answer a question or offered to help in any way. That's what we're all about. We're here to help each other.
And ultimately to grow the division and get more folks involved. And I know we've talked earlier about, some of those efforts being made. Mike, you're going to train shows, meeting and greeting people and talking to them. What kind of feedback are you getting from folks at those shows when you start talking about joining an NMRA division?
There's a number of things. I mean, I think a big thing is people just let it lapse because they feel like they're not getting their money's worth for whatever reason. I'll speak of 2 reasons that I heard just yesterday. The sad part with these reasons is I don't really have an argument. An older gentleman came up to me and said, "You're just an HO club. What am I doing? Why would I join? I'm a 2-rail O guy." And I said, we're not really an HO specific thing, but I don't have an argument to say, yes, we regularly present 2-rail O scale clinics. We'd love to. Come join us. You can do that. The same goes for N-Scale. We had Ken Harstein the other day present a nice clinic, and then he hosted a great layout tour. And Art and I were there. We had a great time. But, our N-Scalers are few and far between. That's been probably the biggest thing is where is the scale inclusiveness? Obviously HO across the industry is by far the leader for a multitude of reasons. But there's still other scales out there, and we've got to represent that. And then the other thing is just, we talk about ages. We talk about I can't get there. These meetings are too far away. According to Ron Pelletier, who we should talk about in a minute, we still have members who get hard copy email or mail notifications. They don't even get emails. So it's a challenge to keep all of the membership involved, however they're getting involved.
Yeah, the number one key piece, communication, right? You got to have communication for any organization, and failure of the communication is the number one cause of a loss of an organization, right? It starts there. So it's always a challenge. And like you said, you got a diverse group of folks, maybe not in scales yet, and we can address that in a second, but you have people that are not the social media email type or whatever. They still like getting snail mail and they want to have hard copies of things. And, you have that generation. Then now to the new generation that doesn't want to have them, there is no mailing them stuff. It's like text me it or
right.
Send me a Facebook Messenger or whatever the case may be. So, and you got guys like me stuck in between. I still like getting and sending snail mail, and I also get email as well. So, yeah, that's got to be a big challenge to try to keep communicating to 170 people.
It is. We have a number of platforms out there. Obviously, I'm on, top of the social media as much as I can be, between Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. But, we have Ron Pelletier, who was our, we can't say a bad thing about. Ron does so much. Ron is the Nutmeg Division. Ron is our communications officer, and he's the one in charge of all the email notifications, hard copies. He used to do the newsletter as well. There's a big demand on him to keep track of all of our membership, and not just our immediate members, but perhaps NMRA national officers who want to know what's going on. And I've spoken to him, and he's the one who said, "Yeah, I still get 10 people who want a hard copy letter. They don't have an email address." So we're constantly evolving. We've picked up Constant Contact in the last year. That was a big push from our last superintendent, Jeff Hankey. And we've been slowly rolling that out. The new website that Chuck Gray's done a great job on is a big step to that. So we can keep pointing people towards more channels. Lucy just opened up a TikTok account, which I'm reluctantly probably going to have to do that. We'll see. I don't know how I'm going to do a TikTok account. Luckily, my wife is very familiar with that app, so I'll get some help there.
There you go.
But we're constantly looking for how can we reach these model railroaders. Like you said, there's got to be more than 150 in the state of Connecticut and those two Massachusetts counties. How can we get to them?
Well, it certainly seems like you're trying to use every asset available to you when it comes to social media content, and using Constant Contact, and right down to putting a postage stamp on stuff and mailing it to the folks that don't participate in those things. Before we get too far away from it, I want to address that scales thing, because right as we have here, Art, you mentioned you're an aero gauge guy, and it's got to start with one, right? When it comes to, you guys don't have coverage of N scale, or you don't have coverage of whatever scale, it starts with one.
That's absolutely correct. 4 narrow gaugers in the entire division that I'm aware of. There was one other gentleman that we talked to last year, but he hasn't been to too many meetings. So we're trying to figure out, trying to bring him back in if we can. But again, when we're putting together clinics, Mike or myself or anyone else in the division, we're working in the scale that we're working in. If you want to see more O2 rail, get involved, come in and do some clinics. We did have a gentleman that did Lionel standard gauge from, back in the 40s and the 30s. That was a great clinic too. And that's, so we're open to it all. We're not going to tell somebody, oh, we're not going to do that. You want to do Garden, you want to do G scale, FN3, you name it, right down to Z scale. We're open for it. I was at the National Narrow Gauge Convention this past summer, and there were a couple of NN3 locomotives that were built on Z-scale mechanisms. They were gorgeous. The level of detail on there, I was just stunned. Somebody wants to come in and do Z-scale? Let's do it. Let's get some clinics going.
I'm reminded of I wrote a post on I think it was Model Railroader forums a number of years ago, and there was a complaint of where did all the good old kit bashing articles go? The stuff from the 80s and 90s of when you took 2 Athearn blue boxes and smashed them together. And whoever the editor was at the time came on the forum and said, we love those articles. We'd love to see them. Nobody submits them. If you'd like to see it, you got to submit it. That's another important point is, all our content is driven by the members, the active members. So, this is our, we push to have more active members to come in with different content and show us different things. And, we're out there being political as much as we can to ask nicely, but what we have is what we have. So if I certainly don't mind presenting multiple clinics in a row, and Art doesn't either. And, we have a good core group of clinicians, but we're always looking for more. Yeah.
Now I'll tell you, as far as scales go, and you mentioned that, Art, I would definitely, the first guy that wants to come in and talk about, do a Z scale 101, that'd be a phenomenal, or N scale, and tell us about it. Tell us why you do it. Tell us, that's kind of the thing. I mean, I kind of have a bias because that's what I like to do here on the podcast, but I would love to go sit at a clinic and have somebody tell me, I got in 10 scale. This is how I got into it. And, this is why I chose it. And here's the pros, here's the cons, and be able to sell it to us. Here's a great scale. And, and then somebody else can do the same thing with a multitude of scales, or garden scale. How do you get started in garden scale? How can you afford to buy all those locomotives? That's one of the question I want to know. But, it's like, I think it's phenomenal that, the diversity, and a lot of this stuff translates to, it's still the idea. You're still within the model railroading mindset. And I just think whether you're an HO scale, N scale, Z scale, or anywhere in between there, you're still picking the right hobby. right? You're in the hobby, you're in the room, you're in the family kind of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lately there's been a big push on shelf layouts,
Right.
and switching layouts. That seems to be a very hot trend. Doesn't matter what scale you're in either. A lot of them are HO, but I've seen some beautiful N scale shelf layouts, some of the ON30 using the HO track. There's some great stuff out there. But again, that's the whole point. N scale, we'll hear a lot of N scalers joke that, it's the forgotten scale. But that's because you're just not coming out and promoting. Show us what you're doing, because there's a big value there. If you're an apartment dweller, you can have a great N scale layout. You can cram a lot of railroad in a very small amount of space, and it would be portable. There's a lot of advantages to N. Somebody's got to, do it. We if that's not the scale we're working in, it's hard for us to present a clinic in that scale or whatever the interest is that you have. But if you put it out there, I think you'll find some other people that are definitely interested.
Absolutely. And like you said, or I said earlier, it starts with one. I get that one through the door, and then next thing you know, we bring the next N scaler in, and then pretty soon you've got a good group of N scalers, and then you've got a group of narrow gauge guys, you got a group of O scale guys, and then everybody's got something to share. And like I said, you're in. Once you're a model railroader, you're in. It doesn't matter what the scale is. There's no reason or need to debate which one's better. It's just it's a preference, and what fits you, what fits your space, what fits your lifestyle, and what fits your enjoyment.
Absolutely. Just like, being a narrow gauger, a lot of these guys, a lot of narrow gaugers, they're gravitating towards like the Rio Grande Southern when it was on its deathbed. I know, ratty old equipment, barely maintained, short trains, not making any money. Where I look at it, what caught my interest was basically the oil and gas boom of the 50s, which caused the Denver and Rio Grande very begrudgingly by management to keep the railroad operations running right up till 1968 with steam locomotives and turn of the century wooden cars, because they didn't want to put a dime into it. Right. Just keep running it into the ground, just because we know sooner or later that boom is going to be over, and we don't want to invest in standard gauging, and we don't want to buy new equipment, so just make it work. But they were running, the longest narrow gauge train at that time was 175 cars. So you think about, think about, modern freight, that's 175 cars on 100-year-old equipment. That's impressive.
Yeah, it's a little sketchy, maybe a little bit too, but definitely, that's fantastic. 1,000 points of entry into this hobby, all can be involved. Everybody can be a part of that. One of the things I want to hit on before we wrap up here, you guys hit a little bit on this topic, is the value proposition of being a member of the Nutmeg Division. And essentially overall, let's talk about being a member, because you're a member of the NMRA, and then being, located in the territory that is the Nutmeg Division makes you a member of the division. Let's talk about it a bit, because I know that's one of the key points that the NMRA is trying to hit home, is that value proposition. And Art, maybe you talk a little bit on that. What's the bang for your buck when it comes to being a member of the NMRA?
First, as Mike had mentioned before, the partnership program. If you really take advantage of all the manufacturers that give us discounts when we're buying our hobby supplies and our models, the savings you get easily pays for the membership for the year in the organization. So to me, that's, paramount right now. And then just the volume of knowledge that all of us members have, and we're all happy to share it with anybody coming through the door. And, you have to come. And again, that's something we also started now within the division, is that we're trying to get on a standard schedule that every other meeting will be in a remote location. We have been meeting at the Wethersfield Police Department for a long time. It's centralized geographically to the division, but you have people that just can't travel that far. So we started last spring, and Mark Herrick hosted out in the eastern half of the state. And this past meeting, we had Ken Harstein and some of the people up in the Springfield area host a meeting for us up there. I just talked to Chris Adams at that meeting too, see if he'd be interested in running one down by the shoreline. And we're also working on having a location out in the western side of Connecticut too. So we're trying to move geographically around the division to basically make it easier for people to get to the face-to-face meetings and get that value out of the knowledge that we're willing to share with everybody in the camaraderie. And it also helps us as far as layout tours go too, because we're getting a new batch of layouts. You don't have to drive as far. If we're down by the shoreline, we can hit layouts that are down by the shoreline. Out by Marks, we can get into Rhode Island. We can even, but just because you're a Nutmeg Division member doesn't mean, we can't, associate with a, Little Rhodey or some of the other divisions around. And we're still all the same group at the end of the day. It's just how we operate ourselves.
We're still the Northeast region. We're still the NMRA. And I think you hit exactly that. The value proposition of the NMRA, it's really the people. And it's, not only just the people that are members, but it's also you and the value that you can provide the NMRA as well. It's the connection between people that really makes the value of being a member of this organization a key piece. So what's, I'll ask Mike, when it comes to trying to, draw members and whatnot, what's next for the Nutmeg Division as you guys look to grow and within the new NMRA that we're starting to see?
We're doing a big push to get outside of our comfort zone in terms of clinic content. As we said before, I know I spoke to several of our current members yesterday, just outright asking, hey, I know you do this. We have a member who's very much into electronics and programming, and we just don't do a lot of clinics on that. So would you be willing to come and do one? And he's like, yeah, I'd be willing to do that. So it's number one is clinic content. I think number two, in terms of what Art said, is we've got to get out of our, the center part of Connecticut and get to our members on the outlying areas. And we start seeing different content. You start seeing different layouts. You start seeing different people, different perspectives. Addition to that, one of the things in social media that I do is I'm very in tune. I try to be in tune to what other divisions are doing. For example, a lot of divisions, a lot of regions do monthly or quarterly modeling contests. And, when I say modeling contests, they're not, I think a lot of people have the negative reaction of it's a scored contest. Some guy's going to pick up my finely detailed model and break all the grabs off. These contests are not that. They're, a very simple contest you can do in a night or two, and it's a popular vote, and the winner gets a $20 Dunkin' gift card or something like that. And one of the things is we're doing for the first time a Nutmeg modeling challenge. So it's already launched. This is on our Facebook page. You can go to the Nutmeg Division Facebook page. It's pinned at the top. And we're going to pick a winner for this modeling challenge at our April meeting, which just so happens to be our board of directors vote. So the more people that show up, the better chance we have of actually doing an effective vote where we have a quorum. And the modeling challenge for April is very simple. It's a plastic food container recycling challenge. You're going to take a plastic food container, the cottage cheese or the spreadable butter, whatever it may be, and you're going to build a small diorama on it. If you're familiar with mini prints, they do the peanut butter lid challenge. It's right along that line. So it's a very simple set of rules. There's 3 rules. Art thinks I should have added more because I've given them too much room, but I wanted it intentionally vague. Again, you go to these layouts and you see the unlimited creativity. And that's what we want, is we want people to see what everyone else is capable of, how everyone else thinks, how can we learn? Right. And there's, to go back to talking about the value proposition, I don't know that you can put a value on the camaraderie and what you learn from other people. I've learned more about operations and layout design in the past 2.5 years than I have in my entirety of being a model railroader. There's so much value in watching other people do things. And I think a modeling challenge is a way to do that. We're talking about a simple little thing where you can see somebody's scenery skills or sculpting skills. So there's that. That's on the Nutmeg Division Facebook page. You can go to facebook.com and type in NMRA Nutmeg and you'll find us. Same thing for Instagram and YouTube. I know we've, also talked about, can we do prototype tours? Can we tie in with local museums? We've got a number of great museums here in Connecticut, and you go up and down the eastern seaboard and there's a number of great museums. So if you're outside of the Nutmeg Division, you can go to those too. But we can tie into that. We can tie into the Naugatuck. We can tie into Essex. We can tie into the Connecticut Trolley Museum that's here in Windsor.
Right.
How can we be involved with railroading, not just model railroading?
Yeah, for sure. The prototype brings a lot of inspiration to the modeling. It's a key part of it. And it's great to have all of that tied in, because I know a lot of us like you, Mike, and love to do the prototype stuff, love to go sit trackside and take photos. And there's just so many elements to this hobby, including just some things that are just outside of it. Before we wrap up, I do want to cover this. We spent the last hour talking about specifically the Nutmeg Division, but in reality, a lot of this conveys across really the globe when it comes to the NMRA and involvement in the national, or I call it the national organization, but really it's an international organization. If you're listening to this now and you're outside of the Nutmeg Division, where would you want to go to find your division, find your region, and sign up to become a member of the NMRA?
First thing, look up the NMRA on the national website, nmra.org, and you'll find almost all the information you need there. They have a map with all the divisions, all the regions on it. You will find out where you sit in life. If you sit on the fringes of a division and you know people in an area that's adjacent to you, there's nothing that says you cannot move to an adjacent division. We've just had a member request to do that. I guess he operates more or associates more with people in Little Rhodey, and he has to be part of the Little Rhodey division. We're not going to stop you. We want you in the organization. Rather have you than not have you. Just because you're not in our division, that's okay. All the information's out there. The National also rolled out the interchange now, the Discord channel. And so you see a lot of people starting to use that more and more. We've even talked about possibly holding our board meetings on that channel or something, so anybody else can watch and see what's going on and realize that we're just not a little clique of individuals that are trying to steer the division. We want people's input. We're trying to be very open and forthright about what we're trying to do, and we're just trying to grow a bigger organization, more people, and have a great time doing it. There's a lot of resources out there, whether you're a more seasoned modeler like some of us here, and you're more comfortable with the face-to-face and the older communications technologies, or if you're a younger person and you're used to the newer forms of communications. It's wide open now. There's plenty of ways to interact with people in the hobby through the NMRA.
Well put, Art. We'll provide all of those links, including to the NMRA website, where you can check out more information on the NMRA. We'll also provide links to the Nutmeg Division specific accounts, including their website and their Facebook page and Instagram and all those other avenues that Mike's got his hands on and is controlling and doing an awesome job with.
All right, very good. Well, I'll tip you off. One last thing that we're trying to do new now, too, that we announced at the Springfield meeting was that James Mayo, our treasurer and secretary, is putting together the start of an Operation Saturday group, which will be the division will be pooling layout owners that would be willing to host operating sessions on Saturdays. And any people that would be interested, whether you're a complete rookie and you've never operated before, right up through veteran operators that would be willing to go to some of these layouts and operate on Saturdays. And so we're trying to bring that aspect out through the division and start getting people together. It wouldn't be the normal op sessions for some of these layout owners. It's just do one for the division and let's attract new people into that side of the hobby too. So we'll be probably launching something more formally in January or February, I would think. So stay tuned, watch for that.
That's an excellent idea. Looking forward to seeing that coming out of the division as well. So. All right, gentlemen, it was great talking about the Nutmeg Division, and appreciate you stopping by and telling us all about it.
Thanks for having us, Ray.
Yes, thank you, Ray. Appreciate coming by.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. Past episodes and more can be found on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.